Good morning and welcome back to World History. Today we are covering early African civilizations. So the early African civilizations are going to span for a large time period from 2000 BC all the way to 1500. So there's 3,500 years essentially in this particular chapter. Just bear with me. We are not covering every single thing, but we do want to talk about mostly the geography of Africa and how it impacted early civilizations throughout Africa. So, the reason that geography is so important is because geography actually is part of the reasons why Africa was so successful early on, and also why so many other nations were able to or wanted to take over parts of Africa and colonize parts of Africa. So we're gonna get into that mostly, and like the resources that are on the really, really rich geographical lands. So Africa is the second largest continent. It's almost completely surrounded by two oceans and two seas. It includes several distinct geographical zones. So at the very top of Africa, you have the Atlas Mountains. Below the Atlas Mountains, you have the Sahara Desert, which is the largest desert on Earth. Then to the east of the Sahara Desert is the Nile River, which is the longest river in the world. And then below the Sahara Desert, you have tropical grasslands in the interior, and you have tropical rainforests along the west coast. So the Congo River feeds the Congo Basin rainforest in Central Africa. And Eastern Africa contains a lot of mountains and canyons, and it's known as the Great Rift Valley. So you have several different climate zones in Africa because it is made up of so many different distinct geographical areas. You have a mild climate zone, which is mostly on the northern coast and southern tip of Africa. So you have moderate rainfall, warmer temperatures, and fertile land so that you have abundant crops and you can support larger populations in those areas. Your deserts, which are the Sahara and Kalahari, are the two largest deserts, and they cover more than 40% of Africa. Even though your deserts are super dry and arid and they are really harsh conditions to live in, this is where a lot of your resources are found. So we'll talk more about that here in a minute also. The rainforest. There are a lot of resources in the rainforest as well. It stretches along the equator. It makes up 10% of Africa. You have heavy rains and warm temperatures with dense forests where little farming and little travel are possible. There are some people who live around the rainforest areas, but mostly they're local people. You don't typically see very many people traveling into the rainforest. You have the tsetse fly, is really prominent in the rainforest area. And basically this fly can bite you and cause paralysis. It'll put you in a coma state. Some people never wake up. It's like the sleeping death, basically. So it's a really rough illness to have to fight. But a lot of the locals know about it, and they know where to go and where not to go, like to stay away. You also have savannas. And savannas are basically just really broad grasslands where you have small trees and shrubs. I think of like the Lion King as like a savanna kind of climate. They're located to the north and the south of the rainforest, and they cover the other 40% of Africa. Rain is really unreliable in these areas, but there's enough for herding and farming. So you may find like a few watering holes here and there, but for the most part, you don't have like a steady rain season in those locations. So here's your desert area as an image. Here is your Great Rift Valley, some of your mountains. Rainforest with lots of water, lots of rainfall, and your savanna. And there's a nice lion there. hiding in the savanna grass. It's where you see a lot of your animals that, whenever you think of Africa, you think, safari animals. This is the Great Rift Valley, the Atlas Mountains back here. And here's some of your coasts, because you do have beaches in Africa as well. So here you have your Atlas Mountains in the northern coast, your Sahara Desert, Great Rift Valley, the Congo, which is basically like your rainforest area. And you see that's your tropical wet. You've got tropical dry, which is your savannas. And then you have down here another desert. And then here you have a marine coast that's very tropical. So for the most part, Africa is very, very, very diverse as far as geography. The reason that it is so important is because people had to adapt to the climate and geography. Only certain places could support civilization, and a lot of the African civilizations ended up being unique because their geography and climate and the vast size of the continent. And so Africa is not a country, it is a continent. Within Africa, there are lots of other smaller countries, so keep that in mind. So one of the first civilizations that we're going to look into is the Kush civilization. And they thrived from about 250 BC to 150 AD. So in 2000 BC, the Kush civilization existed south of Egypt along the Nile River. Egyptians, merchants, traveled here for ivory, ebony, frankincense, and leopard skins. So the economy of the Kush was based on farming because they were located near the Nile. They had, fertile soil. They later emerged as a large trading location, and they learned how to make iron tools. That's really important because they become a more advanced society, and they're able to become experts in trade with many other civilizations. They provided iron, ivory, gold, ebony, and even slaves to the Roman Empire. If you're wondering how they got slaves, well, basically, your Kushites would capture people in the Central and Eastern Africa and then sell them as slaves, originally sold out of, sell them as slaves. So Africans originally sold out fellow Africans into slavery. That's kind of how that started, what got the slave trade began. After Kush declines, then you get the rise of the Aksum. You may also see this spelled AKSUM, ACKSUM, or AKSUM, but AXUM, whatever, same place. So it is located near what is now Ethiopia and was originally founded by the Arabs who mixed their culture with the Africans. Why were the Arabs in Africa? Because they were just across the Red Sea from each other. So they trade pretty often and visit each other pretty often. This civilization flourishes because of its location near the Red Sea. Obviously, when you're close to a body of water, you're going to be able to trade pretty easily, trade, like bring on goods and take in goods from other nations. So they became a trade path between the Mediterranean and India. Just like other civilizations we've talked about, if you're near a trade route, you're going to do well. So Aksum exported ivory, frankincense, myrrh, and you guessed it, slaves. They imported textiles, metal goods, wine, and olive oil. Guess where they got their olive oil from? Any guesses? The Greeks and Romans? Yeah. Okay, anyway. So now it's important that we know the significance of the ivory trade. By the way, here's Aksum. They're located right down here by the Red Sea, so they have like good trade routes getting to India. They're able to go up to the Mediterranean to Europe. They can go into the interior, and there are trade routes all along the Nile River as well. Here's Kush. Your Kush civilization was one of the first civilizations. Anyway, so people in this time loved ivory. Ivory is beautiful. It is soft enough to carve. Most Africans, uh, most Africans wanted it, but Romans wanted it also. You know, Rome is, pretty close to Africa, and so they would trade a lot, or they demanded a lot of ivory because they thought it was so pretty and so, nice. It's bougie. So, ivory comes from elephants, okay? The hunt for ivory in Africa has been a huge topic for like hundreds and thousands of years. There's even a portion of Western Africa that's known as the Ivory Coast. It is important because civilizations were very competitive about getting ivory, and around the 5th century AD, elephants had almost went extinct because so many of them were hunted for their ivory. So ivory comes from the elephant's tusks. And what they would do is, instead of just like cutting part of the tusk off of the elephant, they would actually dig deeper, because the tusk actually goes into the skin. And they would dig deeper, and a lot of times this would kill the elephant, so that they could get all of the ivory from the elephant. And so a lot of elephants died for that reason. Civilizations wanted to be in control of the ivory trade, and so a lot of civilizations in ancient Africa fight each other for territories where there are a lot of elephants. So as a result of this competition for ivory, Axum takes over Kush in the 4th century. So Axum thrives and, outlives the Kushites. And these are some of the tusks from the elephants. And you see how long they are. Like, some of this is not, some of this was probably in the elephant's head. So, they have to like cut out part of the elephant. Probably very painful, really tragic for the elephants. So the Indian Ocean borders Eastern Africa, and this is the same ocean that, surrounds India. Indian Ocean, India, get it? Yeah. So if you remember India's weather, you might remember like monsoons along the ocean. Monsoons didn't really directly affect the climate in Africa, but it did affect trade in Africa. Because to sail from Asia, or to Asia from Africa, you could really only go in the summer because of the direction of the winds. So like the monsoon winds would push the ships towards Asia. So the difficulty in this is that it's very rainy and the waves are very dangerous. A lot of ships would sink during this trip. It's very dangerous. The wind would then reverse in the winter and make it easier to sail from Asia to Africa. And so there was a certain time, like a trade season for going from Africa to Asia or going from Asia to Africa. It depended on the monsoon seasons and which way the winds were blowing. So the boats that they used would have looked very similar to this. And honestly, it's like a sailboat. It's not going to be very durable in high winds. If the winds are going, you don't have very much control in your direction. So it's pretty easy to flip a ship like this. So now we're moving over to the West Coast, and we're going to look at Ghana. So this green blob here represents Ghana on the western coast. And so you see this is the Sahara Desert. We're kind of in a drier, arid area over here. But Ghana is actually located in the upper Niger River Valley, and it's more of a grassland region. So while you have the really dry, arid desert here, you have a pretty decent grassland type climate here. So most of the people here are farmers in small villages. Together, these villages formed Ghana. They were ruled by kings who governed without any laws. Yeah, so if you can imagine how interesting that probably was to rule and not have any laws to rule by. The Ghanaian kings relied on armies of thousands of men to enforce their wishes because there weren't any laws. So basically, it's like you want your men to be loyal to you. if your soldiers aren't loyal to you, then you're obviously not going to be a very good ruler, or you're not going to be able to stay in power. They're going to overthrow you and replace you with someone else who they like better. So the region that they lived in had an abundance of iron, so they prospered from their position of both iron and gold. Yes, gold. There's a lot of gold in Africa. So the heartland of their state was near the richest gold-producing areas in Africa. They used these two resources for trading. They would exchange gold and iron for metal goods, textiles, horses, and salt. Salt is another really important commodity in Africa, located in the desert. Salt is used for food preservation. They, can make their meat last longer. It preserves food, and it makes food taste good. So salt is really important. Another reason that salt is important is because it provides electrolytes. Whenever you're living in dry, arid areas, you kind of need electrolytes because your body is constantly like producing sweat. You're dehydrating. You think of Gatorade having the electrolytes. It's got salt in it. So it's another reason that it's really good for the society. So what they would do to collect salt is they would use camels to transport these big salt sheets across the desert so that they could transport them to the Red Sea or to the Mediterranean Sea, and they could make money off of it. So your camels became known as the fleet of the desert because they would adapt to the conditions and travel across the Sahara. They would move really slow, though, so like 3 miles an hour. A caravan might take 40 to 60 days to reach its destination across the Sahara. So we know that the salt was important to them, but where do they get it? You actually have natural salt deposits under the sand in the Saharan desert. They would bring in slaves to mine the salt. It's a really hard job because you're digging literally in the dry Saharan sand for sheets of salt. And then they would have the slaves bring, once they mine the salt, carry it back across the desert. And then they would, and then after they would load up the camels and load the slaves up to carry it across the desert, they would trade the salt literally pound for pound for gold. That's how valuable it was then. So if you had a big sheet of salt, it's equivalent to a sheet of gold. Very nice. So in addition to the kingdoms of Kush and Axum and Ghana, we also have the kingdom of Mali. So in 1240 AD, Sundal Keita defeated Ghana and established Mali. So Ghana is no more on the west coast. Now you have Mali. He built Mali's wealth from the gold and salt trade. Timbuktu is a famous trading city in Mali. I don't know if you've heard the phrase "from here to Timbuktu" because it's like so far out in the desert. Yeah. Anyway, so many people in Mali farm sorghum, millet, and rice. This is where King Mansa Musa is from also. He makes Timbuktu a center of Islamic learning and builds mosque here. Timbuktu then attracted religion leaders, artists, and students to the Saint-Croix Mosque. So here's a nice picture of what some of your mosques would look like. Keep in mind, Islamic society, like the world of Islam, like it's spreading all through Northern Africa. And you have some of the beautiful like mosaic kind of tiles, the same architecture from Africa is kind of coming into from the Arabian Peninsula is coming into Africa as well. So fun fact, Mansa Musa is actually known as the richest man ever in the world. It's said that he marched across the desert with like a huge herd of camels and people, like his whole town, and he would just like throw gold out along the way. Whenever they'd stop at different cities and stuff, he would just throw gold to everybody. And I don't know, he's definitely really famous. I think the video clip here is about him. You need to watch the video if you haven't on your own time. Of course, I can't show it to you. It doesn't show you the sound. So here's another one of those temples that was built over in the desert. And let's talk about the kingdom of Songhai. Okay, so like the Niger River flooded and provided rich soil for the kingdom of Songhai. So under Sunni Ali, the Songhai began to expand. Sunni spent lots of his reign on horseback, leading his army to different military campaigns. They actually take over a lot of cities, including Timbuktu. They conquer the salt and gold trade. So basically, you go from having Ghana to Mali, and then Songhai kind of like conquers Mali. So you've got conquering over conquering over conquering. And these are all people who are wanting control of the salt and the gold because that's a really valuable trade. And if these people can take over these kingdoms, then they're going to do it because, they want to make money. So Sunni Ali basically is like the leader of the Songhai and helps them expand and take over the salt and gold. So the Songhai Empire reaches the height of its power during the reign of Muhammad Tur. He overthrew Sunni in 1493 AD, and then Muhammad maintains peace with a large navy and soldiers on horseback. So Sunni fights, Sunni gets conquered, Songhai continues to expand. And so this is how large the Songhai Empire becomes. Ghana was just this little bitty blob. Then Mali gets a little bit bigger, and then Songhai, they go buck, expanding. So south of the Axum along the coast of the Indian Ocean, so Axum, keep in mind, is over here. South over here along the Indian coast, in this area is what we're looking at, is the Bantu. So south of the Axum along the coast of the Indian Ocean was a mixture of people. Many worked as farmers, hunter-gatherers, and raised livestock. A group of people called the Bantu began to expand into East Africa. They would grow crops for their own use, along with yams, millet, and sorghum, melons, beans, what have you. So the Bantu used iron and stone tools, and the men would hunt and conduct local trade in salt, copper, and iron. Women would work in fields. They'd care for children. They created the city of Great Zimbabwe and taught other people how to grow bananas. So they have a lot of different versions of the Bantu language today that they communicate. They're the ones that they communicate with the clicks, the clicking kind of language. But the Bantu are another really important group during this time period. And so they migrate around the river areas, and they migrate kind of in search of resources. So as far as the Indian Ocean trade and ports, there were many trade ports on the eastern coast because of the monsoons and trade. The Bantu people took part in this trade along with Mogadishu, Mombasa, and Kilwa. The merchants who lived on this coast became very wealthy. So the East Coast is really a really prominent coast even today. They build buildings made of coral cut from the cliff along the shore. The Great Mosque of Kilwa is here, and then you also have the Great Mosque of the Great Husuni Kubwa that contained more than 100 rooms. And so these buildings are on the coast, and they're like castles made of this coral and stone. They're really intricate. Obviously they're mostly in ruins now, but they were really intricate, huge buildings. They also, the wealthy people that live on the coast had large houses with imported Chinese porcelain and indoor plumbing. And so they call them the Mercedes people, they drive nice cars today, but they just have a ton of money because they're able to trade so often with other nations, especially the Asians. So the Swahili people began to emerge on the coast, the eastern coast as well. Swahili just means people of the coast. And the language rose as a result between trade with the people of the Arab lands and the Bantu people. So it's a mixture of the Arabian languages and then the Bantu languages. So the Arabic and Bantu words would combine and enable the two groups of people to communicate without a common language to communicate. And there's a video clip of those, the clicking language and the Swahili. Hakuna Matata is a Swahili word, by the way. A lot of the words in the Lion King and stuff like that are Swahili. Hakuna Matata, one wonderful phrase, means no worries. for the rest of our days. Okay, anyway, sorry, moving on. Stay focused. So societies in South Africa developed much more slowly than other areas. So, like, most people lived in stateless societies or groups of independent villages. They were organized by clans and led by a local ruler or clan head. A majority of this land is grassland regions where people would farm, cattle herd, and trade. Villages were built inside walls to help protect domesticated from the wild animals at night because, you know, you've got like lions and like elephants and stuff like that you have to protect from, because if you don't build walls, then, you know, anyway, you're going to get killed, or your animals are going to get killed. So Zimbabwe was the wealthiest and most powerful state in the region, and they had prospered from the gold trade with the Swahili on the eastern coast. So Zimbabwe was created by the Bantu. We're talking about it again now because Zimbabwe is located in both the East and South Africa. So Zimbabwe sat on a hill overlooking the river. They had a stone wall around the city, and they could have 10,000 residents inside at any point in time. So here's one of their great walls to protect them, the great enclosure that they use to protect themselves. It's just this big oval space surrounded by an 800-foot wall, and it's like 17 feet thick and 32 feet high. So we don't really know exactly why they made it so big and so deep, other than the fact that they wanted protection. So they would stack granite blocks on top of each other to make the walls, and like you still see like some parts of it standing. So the city of Zimbabwe was abandoned by the 15th century because of damage to the land and like overgrazing, like the land overusing the land, unfortunately. So they had to like move on to other locations. But most cities had these big walls because, you know, lions, cheetahs, wild animals, also elephants can trample people. So you want to be able to protect yourself from an elephant stampede, just in case. I'm going to stop here and we'll finish up in the next lecture. Okay. So email me if you have any questions or anything doesn't make sense. Have a great rest of your day.